Hello, reader. This text is a substantial summation of the many ponderings I have had over time about life in general. Especially in the context of delivery driving, it provides the best space for pondering and observation. With that said, I hope you can appreciate that and take something away from this text. You know, atoms are referred to as the basic building blocks of creation, or matter, as a whole. Is it not interesting that they are called building blocks and not something else? A building of any kind, big or small, requires a builder to create it. Otherwise, would it be correct to say that the atoms are sentient particles that built themselves? Do the atoms govern themselves? If the atoms do govern themselves, where did they get the tools to build themselves? How could they know to build themselves in the fashion that they are? Where would that even come from? And how could there be so many types of atoms, along with the properties that make them up? What is going on there? If atoms are self-creating, despite being called building blocks, then that is a lot to manage, don't you think? Cells also belong in the category of being a building block, and this time it's of life, as they are the smallest units of life. There are multiple types of cells, and each has its own structure and capabilities. Fascinating, is it not? How could that be? Are the cells also sentient in their own function? Can a building block build itself? If that is the case, then I guess we should call cells the building blocks of life that build themselves. Does that sound right? When you have a brick on the ground, should you expect that brick to build itself into a building? Do the cells as well as the bricks govern themselves? Not to mention, for all the components that make up just an animal cell, there are plenty. Mitochondria, nucleus, ribosomes, endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi apparatus, and so on. Tell me, if these so-called building blocks lack a grand creator, where did the cells go to find these components that make themselves up? After that, how could the cells know that every one of these components that make them up would need to be in place to work effectively and in sync? Try to wrap your mind around that hypothetical concept, but let's continue to play along with the idea that these cells have no builder behind them other than themselves. For all the different types of cells that exist, what stops these cells from getting together? Why don't I see a plant cell coexisting with other animal cells that make up a person? Are the plant cells just simply not worthy of coexisting with the animal cells? Are cells now officially displaying discrimination against one another? My goodness, ladies and gentlemen, shouldn't we be supporting the rights of plant cells to coexist with animal cells in the same body? Or could it be that it was by design and not just a coincidence? After all, if a plant cell were mixed in with animal cells, then wouldn't that introduce an anomaly to the bodily system that cells create collectively? Speaking of animal cells, although we humans are also classified as animals, here is an interesting thought experiment. Ask yourself this: for all the plants, animals, fungi, and other life forms that exist on this earth, for all the species, for all the subspecies, and for all the sub-D sub-subspecies, I made that one up, what are the odds that out of all of that, we all came out as humans? What stopped me from being a cockroach, a mouse, a whale, a mushroom, a tree, or whatever else I can think of? Is that by coincidence, or was that by design? I don't know, dear reader. You tell me. You have a brain, so you must know something that I don't. Actually, hold that thought. Did I just mention the human brain? Oh boy. Now isn't that just a huge can of something to digest? Well, long story short, the human brain is quite distinct from the brains of other animals, that is. And here is where I think the detail of the human brain is most telling. The left hemisphere deals with logic, language, speech, analytics, and control over the right side of the body, while the right hemisphere deals with spatial reasoning, abstract thinking, musical interpretation, creativity, emotional recognition, and controlling the left side of the body. Both of these sides of the brain work together, and both cover essential areas of the human experience. This current reality is about survival. So then why would I need to worry about abstract thinking and musical interpretation? Why would we need that? Do the bears need that? Do the hyenas need that? Do the hawks need that? What about the sharks? Maybe they could use some Bluetooth speakers, the underwater editions, of course. I guess they've been missing out on those classical music and heavy metal sounds, playlists as they devour their prey. Maybe they could use a lesson in abstract thinking so that they can admire the artistry of the squid they're pursuing. Jokes aside, you get the point. And so I ask, is this just a coincidence, or is it by design? On a side note, we call ourselves social creatures, and we may also call other animals creatures. Guess what? A creature is a created being. Since that is the case, who is the creator? Let's move on. To further expand on that, why is art so appealing? What makes the human body and human form so appealing? Do you find the apes and monkeys at your local zoo more attractive than another fellow human? I won't judge you if you do, as I am not the one to get into other people's literal monkey business if that's what does the trick for them. But if I had to take an honest and wild guess, then I would say the answer to that question is probably no. Aside from that, what makes standing upright as a human feel natural on a visual and functional level? Sure, we can traverse on all fours, but does that feel natural compared to standing up and walking? Sure, we can traverse on our hands with a handstand and intense balance, but would that feel natural even for a short period of time? What makes human skin visually complete and nice to the touch? Why are the eyes so mesmerizing? Why do eyebrows carry expressiveness? Why does the nose give shape and form to the face? Why are the lips so nice to the eyes and soft to the touch? Why does having full sets of teeth complete a smile? Why is hair so visually appealing? Why does hair swaying along to a gust of wind look so mesmerizing? Why stylize it to add charm or unique form to the human form? Fingernails and toenails are made from the same substance, keratin, as hair, believe it or not, and yet they have a different form and function. Why stylize them? Why do painted nails look nice? Why add artistry to such body parts when your survival is constantly on the line, right? Could there be something to that end? Why do we use descriptors for ourselves, animals, other organisms, and even inanimate objects? What makes a little bird cute and a panther fierce? Why even bother using such words? Where does that come from? What makes a baby precious and a peacock majestic? Again, what's up with these descriptors? What makes certain hairstyles or outfits look good on you, and then other hairstyles and outfits not so much? What's going on there? Should that matter? And since it appears to, then where does that all come from? Also, why do people like to dye their hair different colors? What's the appeal of that? Where does that come from? What does that have to do with survival? This also applies to people who get tattoos or piercings. Why do it? Doesn't that go against survival? Piercing yourself with sharp objects just to look pretty with some artwork engraved in your skin or earrings that complement your ears and the framing of your face. And yet, people do it. So I ask again, where does that come from? On a side note, why do people care about the color of a dress or suit? The fabrics, the contrast, the shapes, the design, the form, the way it complements the body? What can make a sculpture mesmerizing? After all, let's say that we took a whole log and just started chipping away at it to form a wooden sculpture of a bear. Why does that catch our attention? Wasn't the log enough? Doesn't the log have its own distinct and cylindrical shape? However, by cutting it down with precision, we unlock a new form and a new appreciation. Tell me, where does that come from? Is that just coincidental? Does that help with survival? Or is that an activity being done out of delight? I venture to say that it is the latter, so why do it? Don't you need to eat? Don't you need to drink? And yet, you spend time making a wooden sculpture of a bear and being fascinated and delighted by the process and finished result. Well, shame on you for not putting your survival as your priority at all times like most other organisms do. Of course, I say this last bit in sarcasm, and as always, I ask you this: where does that type of joy in a world such as this come from? Could this small example be an indicator of something that goes beyond the surface-level grind and struggles of the human being, or is that all just a coincidence? Why is music so inherently appealing? Why is there harmony in music? Harmony being when certain notes are played simultaneously together while sounding whole and on key. Why does that sound wonderful when done right? And then, if you were to change one of the notes even by one tone, it would sound off, right? Where does that come from? Where does harmony come from? Why does changing the pitch of a song give it a different feel or atmosphere? Why does changing the tempo of a song give it a different groove and emotion despite being the same song? Why do we even have something called melody? You know, the succession of notes in music that creates a type of rhythm using whatever sound. That's what we call melody, right? Where does that come from? Why is that appealing? Is that just random? Tell me, are the sharks in the oceans concerned about melody when they're eating other fish? So then why are we concerned about melody if this world is about survival of the fittest? It's about just waking up, paying your bills, and just rinsing and repeating, right? Why is art a thing? Why is half of our brain able to perceive art, to perceive the abstract? Why does that matter? Why is that important? Why is that there? Who put that there? Did it just come about on its own? Why is anime, and just animation in general, so appealing? Does such a medium have anything to do with survival? Other than the people who work on it for a living, are you as the watcher doing it for survival or for your viewing pleasure? If it's the latter, where does the pleasure come from? By the way, what is it about a sports car that's so appealing? What is it about a race car that makes it look sleek and awesome compared to a regular car? Why is it that certain shapes generate different emotions out of people? Why is lightning so mesmerizing to the eyes, regardless of the danger it poses? Where does all of that come from? Why do we like to travel? What is it about traveling that's so appealing? What is it about seeing places, new or familiar places, that just hits a sweet spot? Why are we fascinated by that? Why are we fascinated about seeing different things and different structures and different types of plants and animals and all these different things? Why is that so appealing? Why is exploration appealing? Where does that come from? Is it just solely for survival? I mean, some people will spend thousands of dollars just to go to a place, just to see what it has, just to see the attractions and the exhibits. Where does that come from? Is that random? Does that point to nothing? Is that just a byproduct of itself? It has no source? It's just what it is? What is it about walking in a park that's just soothing? What is it about the trees and the sunlight and just breathing in the air? Why is that significant? The bears aren't worried about taking in the sights. The bears are worried about their survival. So why do we care? Shouldn't we be like the bears? When we're going through these parks or these forested areas or whatever, shouldn't we be concerned about survival, looking for food, all that type of stuff? So what's going on there? Why is that inherently appealing? Why are roller coasters so appealing? Why are they so thrilling? We'll spend all this money to go to amusement parks just to try out the rides. Is that part of survival? Why is that appealing? Where does that come from? What's going on there? Why don't the monkeys have a desire to go on a roller coaster? Why don't the birds have a desire to go on a roller coaster and have fun? Why do we have that? What's going on there? Who put that there? Where's that come from? Is it just random? Even just the act of having fun? Why is having fun such an important thing? Why is that even a thing? Why is that an aspect? This world is about survival, right? What right do we have to laugh and have fun? Why should we feel joy? Why are we capable of feeling joy? Where does that come from? If there's no creator, if there's no one watching, why does laughter matter? Shouldn't we be in survival mode all the time? Shouldn't we be alert? Why don't we have a desire to just take each other out right now? Why are we cooperating? Why don't we have it in us to just kill one another? Now, of course, I know there are people out there who have a desire to kill, but I'm talking about the general person. Why don't we just have that desire to just kill our fellow man? Why is it that we have to be provoked before even considering lethal force? Why is it that when military men and women come back from war, they commonly develop post-traumatic stress disorder? Where does that come from? Why does that matter? Shouldn't it be survival of the fittest, even against your own brethren? Why is tickling a thing? Isn't it interesting that our bodies are hard enough to sustain our form without collapsing in on ourselves, but at the same time, they're soft enough that if you were to touch someone, or rub them in certain spots, or grip them repeatedly, they laugh? Interesting. Where does that come from? Why is that a thing? Is that random? Is that part of survival? Something that can generate joy just from a touch? Why is that a thing? There are people out there who love to cook. The very action that's tied to survival, tied to eating. How can someone have a love for something that is tied to survival, in which, if you couldn't do it, you would be in a very disadvantageous position? And yet, there are people who have a passion for it, who love doing it. Hell, we even have something called culinary arts, where cooking is an art. The display of food is an art form. Why does that matter? Why are people fascinated by that? Why is that a thing? Is that random? Is that just a byproduct of itself? It has no source? The human body is very expressive. Why is dancing mesmerizing? When someone is breakdancing on the street, why are those dynamic movements so satisfying to witness? Why does that matter? Where does that come from? When someone is doing ballet, ice skating, or something similar, why does it look so elegant? Why do we even describe it as elegant? Where does that come from? Why is it that maybe even on a subconscious level, we say, "Oh my God"? And why don't we say, "Oh my science," huh? Why don't we say, "Oh my survival"? What's up with that? Where does that come from? Gee, I wonder. Maybe it's pointing towards the fact that there is a God after all. Furthermore, why is it that we say, "Thank God," even subconsciously sometimes? Why don't we say, "Oh, thank science"? It's almost as though we're thanking a being that can listen to us, that is aware of us. On the other hand, what is science? Is it an entity? Does science have thoughts? Is science aware of what you're going through? Does it care? When it comes to burials, people say rest in peace subconsciously or consciously. Well, guess what? Last time I checked, resting is a verb. Resting is an action, and in order to perform an action, don't you have to be alive in some way, in the first place? So what's going on with the deceased? Are they dead? Do they cease to exist? Or are they somewhere resting, hypothetically speaking? What's going on? I thought we just ceased to exist. I thought we just became nothing. Whatever that looks like, it's almost like there's more after this life. It's almost like there is an afterlife. It's almost as though we can't even conceptualize ceasing to exist. We don't even know what that's like. We can't even conceptualize what it was like, even before we were born. Dear reader, are you starting to see the point? Are you starting to get the bigger picture here? Does it seem like this life has more to it than just the daily grind of survival? The human experience in itself indicates that there's something more to life, to existence, than just mere survival. It almost seems like we were meant to live in a state where we can be creative, cooperative, and happy in each other's company instead of being competitive, led by ego, and led by survival instincts. Doesn't it seem like there's something more to it? Doesn't it seem like we were created for something more? Maybe I'm the crazy one here. Let me also point this out, too. Again, you don't have to take anything I say as true. Let me just say this. There are people who are only willing to believe something with their own eyes. Yes, the very same eyes that, if you were to poke them hard enough with a pointed object, you could become blind. So now you have one less eye. So now, I guess, you're only willing to believe something if you can see it through your only good eye. But what happens if that eye goes out as well? Now you're blind. So how are you going to believe then? How are you going to process reality then, with no working eyes? How would such a scenario shift your perspective? Perhaps you would shift your mindset to where if something can't be audibly heard, then it mustn't exist. Okay. Then what would happen if your eardrums were pounded to oblivion, and now you've lost your hearing and gone deaf? So now, how are you going to process reality? How are you going to believe now? It's easy to say, oh, if I don't see it, it doesn't exist. Oh, if I don't hear it, it doesn't exist. Oh, if I can't smell it, it doesn't exist. Oh, if I can't touch it, it doesn't exist. Oh, if I can't taste it, it doesn't exist. It's easy to say these things, right? When your body is whole, when you don't have any missing body parts, when you're not amputated in any way, shape, or form, it's easy to say these things. It's easy to feel confident in your senses and grasp on reality. But what happens if even some of those senses are stripped away? And then what? What are you left with? How do you process reality? When a man is stripped of his belongings, and he's homeless, what else does he have? Who does he turn to? He is susceptible to anything now. He's susceptible to the weather, and he has to wait and hope that there are people who are willing to give something away. Furthermore, most of the time, when you give them something, they say, God bless you. What am I saying? This is about humility, understanding, and seeing the little things that are often overlooked since they evidently matter and can make a difference. It tells me that there's something there. It personally tells me that there's a creator behind all this. The only difference is this reality is corrupted by something we call sin. The transgression of God's law, of God's command, and sin leads to death. This is what the Bible says in Genesis. When Adam and Eve ate from the fruit, they were cursed with sin, and every other descendant after that, likewise, was also cursed with sin. And we are also cursed with sin, currently as it stands. Sin is the only thing that explains why things die. A scientist can go for hours and hours and hours explaining the mechanics of death, but they can't get to the root of why things have to die. Why do we have to kill each other and other creatures to survive? And to what end? Because we still end up dying anyway. So what is the point? What's going on? Is there any deeper meaning to this? And to that I say yes, because it's a fact that we die, and that this life is temporary. That tells me that we were never meant to live out this type of existence forever, let alone at all. Nonetheless, here we are. This is why I give you, reader, the gospel of Jesus Christ. To give you some hope, to give you some encouragement, to let you know that this life is literally not the end-all, be-all. It is because we all pass away from this lifetime into the next one. After everything I've just outlined, are we still just a coincidence, an anomaly? Are we not important? Does our existence carry no weight? Are we just a byproduct of nothingness despite our preferences in self-expression? Are you willing to take your chances with the idea that a theoretical explosion made all this stuff possible? Are you willing to bet on that? Are you staking your life on it? Your potential eternity on it? Is that truly worth it? Or are you willing to take the chance that there is an actual creator, a builder of this reality, that is aware of everything within? We are living in crazy times, and things don't seem to be improving. Well, guess what? If you ask me, these appear to be the last days where the hearts of many would grow cold, where all sorts of wars would break out, where more famine would take place, where earthquakes would emerge more frequently, where abnormal weather patterns would manifest, where more illness would sprout, where deception would be on high, and now we can't be too certain if something is AI or not anymore. By the way, AI keeps rapidly improving, so who knows what the future holds in that regard. And then, to top it off, gas and other forms of energy are going up in price. Does it seem like this world is sustainable? Does it seem like we still have a long, prosperous time on this earth in this current direction? Or does it seem like something is about to give? Well, this is why I tell you all the gospel of Jesus Christ, that whoever believes in him and his finished work on the cross will have eternal life that can never be taken away. That's why it's called eternal, not temporary. It is for anyone who believes in what he did, that he paid for all of our sins on that cross, past, present, and future, and that he was buried, and that he rose again on the third day, overcoming death, so that we don't have to perish like that. He paid it all. Now it's just up to you to believe it. Now I ask, do you want to go on to exist in a reality where all these positive aspects of the human experience that I lightly touched on become fully realized in a reality where it was intended that we can enjoy each other's company, that we can enjoy and make art, that we can explore to our heart's content, and so on? In addition, these activities, and more, would be done without the threat of debt and death hanging over us at every waking moment, as it does on this earth. Of course, you don't have to believe that, but I very much do. Lastly, let me say this final part. They say that all good things must come to an end, but I say that's a load of garbage. If God is good, and if God is here, then that is not going to happen. The good things will actually persist, and the bad things will finally go away once the time is right. How is anyone supposed to have any hope when they hear all good things must come to an end? I say, do not allow yourself to be troubled by such pessimism. I personally already have enough as it stands when it comes to folks these days. Have some hope and be reinvigorated by this message, for this will be my last written message to you all. And all I ask is that you read and then ponder over this message. Ponder on everything, big or small things, and tell me that it doesn't have a source, because I believe it does. Give it some serious thought if you're still skeptical. Share it if it resonates and feels right to do so. Of course, I'm not forcing you to do anything. You can do whatever you want. And why does this matter to me, you may ask? After all, I'm a nobody. I don't really talk to many people. I keep to myself most of the time, and I like it that way. So why does any of this matter? Why should I care about anyone else? Gee, I wonder where that comes from, too. Is that random? Does that have anything to do with this whole analysis? You all know the answer to that. God bless you all, and thank you so much for reading this if you made it to the end.